So it was my very first time. My brand new boss was driving me over the private bridge that connects New York City to Rikers Island, which is a 400-plus acre maximum security jail in the center of the East River in New York City. She had hired me based on this curriculum that I had written that taught basic literacy to imprisoned women through the lens of self-esteem, self-empowerment, women's studies. I had created this curriculum and I took it straight to her and I said, please hire me to go into the prisons and jails. And she said, absolutely, this is amazing. So she's driving me over the bridge and I have my curriculum, my class thing. You know, it's a frightening place, Rikers Island. It's actually 10 jails on 400 acres with an average of 10,000 inmates passing through those jails on a daily basis. And as we're driving over the bridge and the guard gate is coming up and, you know, she's telling me that they're going to make us get out of the car, they're going to check the trunk, then we're going to go into facility, they're going to pass out. She goes, oh, and by the way, there were no spots in the women's facility. I'm actually going to have you go in with male inmates tonight. And I said, but the class that I prepared is about women's studies and women's empowerment. And she said, yeah, that's fine. You're going to be working with primarily young gang members. And it's a facility where they get sent when they've acted out on Rikers Island and they've reoffended. And they get sent to this facility. It's for very violent young gang members, male. And I sat there and I was like, I could just say no. I could just say turn the car around. I'm not going to be locked in a room with 20-something male gang members with a curriculum on, you know, empowering women. And I thought, so what? I can do this. I've done harder things. I've actually been in scarier places than a room full of male inmates. And as we're driving through the next checkpoint, and she's saying things like, you know, here are a couple things to remember. If someone exposes himself to you, get the guard. If a fight breaks out, get the guard. If someone threatens you or has a weapon, get the guard. And I'm saying, what do you mean get the guard? Isn't the guard going to be in the room with me? And she's like, oh, no, they don't have enough personnel for that. He'll be out in the hallway. But he'll hear you if you yell. So that was that. So fast forward a few years later, and I am standing in the middle of my very first networking meeting in Portland, Maine. I've moved here from New York City, years after my baby's dad left us. And I left my waitressing job and I started my own business. And it's my very first time at a networking meeting in Portland, Maine. And the networking meeting is full of amazing women, but they're very conservative women. They all have pearls and they're older and they're wearing sort of dark clothing. Very conservative, very nice, but then there's me. And I'm thinking, I'm at the foyer and I'm looking into the room and I'm like, this is never gonna work. These women are never gonna talk to me. They're never gonna think that I'm a business coach who actually has a lot of success guiding women to businesses that they love. And they're gonna just completely shun me. And I should just turn around. There's got to be another networking meeting. I should just turn around and leave. And then I thought, you know what? So what? I'm here. I might as well go in. I might as well see, because one of the things that I've learned is that it's not okay to make up other people's stories for them. It's not okay to decide what other people are thinking. So I walked in and I made some friends that were among my very first friends in Portland. About 6 to 8 months ago, it was my very first time here at Peloton. And it might not have been 6 months ago. It was my very first time. And I put my name in a hat to speak, mostly because my 10-year-old daughter was with me. And she said, Mom, they're asking people to speak. You should speak. You have something to say. And I thought, I don't know about that. You know, it's definitely a very different crowd. And I really like the crowd. And they feel a lot more like my people. But, you know, I'm I'm still going to get up there and I'm still going to look different. And it's still possible that no one is going to really hear me, or that they won't understand what I do, or that they'll look at me and they'll think, you do what? Really? But my kid was there and she was watching me. And so I put my name in the hat and I was like, they're probably not going to call me. And they called me and I was like, ah. And she was like, Mom, go, speak, do it. And I thought, so what? You know, the worst that can happen is that I speak and everyone's like, well, there's a good example of how not to speak in public. But my kid doesn't know the difference because she doesn't know anything about public speaking. And all she sees is that I had the balls to get up and do something that scared me. And that became the biggest thing. And so I got up and spoke. And the piece that I want to leave you with is that we all have our own versions of so what, right? And the thing is that on the other side of so what is so much possibility. So if the worst comes to worst and you embarrass yourself or people didn't like what you said, you're still on the other side. And that's a really awesome place to be. Thank you.
My name is Doug Malcolm. I'm running a brand new nonprofit called Portland Wheelers. We give folks rides around town on the trails and in quiet neighborhoods who are disabled. They can't ride a bike themselves, but would love to go for a ride. Young kids, old people, folks with all different kinds of disabilities. We just started this year. We gave already about 125 people rides, ran about 1,100 miles, and just had a gas. So we're going to scale up a lot over the winter and be ready for a big year next year. So this story goes back to when I was 23 years old. I'm 62 now. My first child was on the way, and my partner and I were living up in Washington County. We were back to the land hippies. This is in 1973 or 4. And in those days, as I told the story to Jason, if you there were not many midwives around. Let's start with that. And the midwife we were going to work with, a great lady, she worked with us for the first 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months, and then said, sorry guys, but I'm heading out to California. So instead of staying with us through the full pregnancy, she left. And I was starting to say, in those days, certainly up in Washington County, I don't know down here, but in the 70s and in Maine, home births were not looked well upon by anybody outside or in the system, the birthing system, hospital system. And if you hadn't started with a primary doc at the beginning of your pregnancy, they didn't want to take you on. It was punitive. They wouldn't work with you. So it was either we leave the area and find somebody down here probably, or we do it ourselves. So we decided, well, hell with them, we're going to do it ourselves. So we did. Fortunately, Talara is her name. She was in really good health. She'd been a modern dance, both teacher and also yoga teacher and dancer in New York City, and just knew her body really well. And we were hippies. We were just going to do it. So we lived up in a little town called Addison, and invited a whole bunch of our friends. There were 10, maybe 12 people there the day of the birth. And everything went pretty fine, except it went a little longer than we expected. And Talara had the stamina, but still it was going long. So I said to her, well, you know, sweetie, there's this sort of shiny surface over Seth's head. We can see his hair, I can see his hair and stuff. I'm just going to scratch this little shiny surface because I think it's blocking his birth. It's blocking all the fluid that needs to come out. I'm a nurse now, but I had none of this training back then. And so I did, but since I didn't really know what would happen or how fast it would happen, I wasn't prepared for it. As soon as I did that, it was like popping a balloon. And Seth came flying out. And the bed was a high bed, it was about this high. And I sort of had a knee on the bed, and I was like this, but he came out so fast, and I never caught or held a brand new baby. It was like, as I was saying to Jason, it was like taking a hike, but like a flying hike. And he was really slippery. So I caught him. He seemed to go like about a half a foot before I actually had him. And I caught him, but I sort of wobbled, but fortunately the bed was still right there, and he sort of landed on the bed, and then I got him. And that's what happened. And it was a wonderful start to his life. Thank you.
So I've adjusted my story based on those two incredible stories that we heard. I'm going to tell a little bit about where I'm from, who I am, and how that leads up to how I got here, and then the little storylet about the so what and what it means for now. So I'm Vince Pelote with DiVinci Consulting. I live in the mountains, work by the sea. The first story I want to share with you about what was life to work in the mountains. About 3 years ago, on a March day, I was delivering a workshop to people in my hometown. And it's snowing out, and I'm really excited. It's a day of commitment building, a day-long workshop. And we get to lunchtime, and I'm thinking, wow, this is going incredible. Really great day. We're going to transition into the afternoon with them. I'm going away the next 3 days to ski in Quebec. Life doesn't get any better. Made a mistake of checking my voicemail at lunchtime, and there was a message on the voicemail that said, "Hi, I'm Sarah, and I need to get you need to call me. I've tried to reach you and I couldn't get you, and I'll call you back if I can't get you by the end of the day." And so I called Sarah back, and she said, "Well, how are you doing?" And I said, "I'm doing great." She said, "Well, I have some news for you. You have malignant melanoma in your left arm. It's surface spreading. We got it all, but you need to have it excised right away." So I'm thinking, okay, I'll get this scheduled. There's got to be a story in here that I can share for the afternoon to get me through. What's that story going to be with the group, and what is it going to really mean? So it led me to that afternoon. I shared whatever story I shared with them, and I'm in the middle of the story. The reaction wasn't quite what I thought as I was sharing it with them, because they seemed more shocked than me, and I probably should have been in more shock. But I got through it, and I said to myself, living in the mountains here, I need to take control. I need to take control of my life and make sense of all of this. And so the hats were one way for me to take control, because I have to look at the sun differently. So I have a great collection of hats. And so that's a little bit of story of what it's like to live in the mountains, why I wear my hats, and why I'm proud to be with DiVinci Consulting. Second storylet, how I got here. We were shutting down our business. We did national consulting in healthcare. We were shutting that down, and we had some Massachusetts clients, and we're looking at a place to go to relocate the business. This was a year and a half ago. And so we're looking at Concord, New Hampshire, the Seacoast area, central Massachusetts, and Portland. So we interviewed a bunch of people, and we're getting close to thinking about Portland. We liked it because Portland has a lot of coaches and an entrepreneurial. And we said, a lot of coaches, we don't have to create a need. We'll come in and do what we do well, and there'll be a market. We don't have to create that market for us. But let's start meeting some people. We met the Chamber of Commerce people in each of the areas. And they all were the same, except for Portland. Portland's Chamber of Commerce was different because it had Abby. And it had what Abby did. And no other chamber had Abby McGilvery there. And we got to tell our story. Abby helped us articulate and made us feel truly welcome here in Portland. And so, at this point, I'd like to formally thank her because it was in part we're here because of Abby. The third piece, the third storylet that I'll share with you is that when I got into consulting 27 years ago, I felt like, who am I to be advising others? I need to do some research. Wanted to do research in the area of total quality management. So for those of you that go back a bit, you know how far back I'm going. 27 years, total quality management was really big back then. So we wanted to do some research and hooked up with a behavioral science firm and had a meeting with the president, Lyle Spencer, of that firm. And we had our premise, my partner and I at the time, of studying leadership and total quality management and what impact did their training have. So we sat across from Lyle, and I knew a little bit about Lyle. He's the president of McBurr and Company, studied under David McClellan, Abraham Maslow. He was the chair of psychometrics at the University of Chicago. A little intimidating as we're sitting there, but I'm enthusiastic and still relatively young. And so what happened was I said to, Lyle said to us, this makes sense, but what's the independent and the dependent variables? The person that I'm with threw a pen under the table because we hadn't been prepared to talk about it. But my training in economics I was able to wing it enough so that he bought into the research. We went and did the research, and then fast forwarded from that research, Lyle left McBurr, and he and I became business partners. So we're about 10 years later, and we have an instrument called measuring employee climate, which gets a little bit at motivation. So I would call Lyle up, and I would say to Lyle, what's the difference between climate and employee satisfaction? Employee satisfaction was really big at the time. And he would say, so what? And I would say, well, gee, thanks, Lyle, and I'd hang up and hope that no one would ask me that question again. Maybe 1 year later, and someone would say, well, yeah, this is a good tool, but we'd like to measure employee satisfaction. What's the difference? So I didn't know the answer. So I'd call Lyle, and Lyle would say, so what? And I had to think back, chair of psychometrics, independent, dependent variables. And in further conversations, it came to me that employee satisfaction is not predictive of great results. It's motivation. And so that field has evolved. It's evolved from the employee satisfaction to engagement. Engagement means committed. But engagement also is not predictive. There's no so what. The predictive is the last piece, which is where you're highly motivated. And you can take a look at yourself and see where you fit. Highly motivated is that you're happy, which is what engaged is, you're involved, which is what committed is, and you're excited. And when you have that, for us, where our work has evolved, is you have what we call people that will go above and beyond. And the last piece of the so what for organizations is that you have the triple R's, what you would all want, because it's within the triple R's is where lies profitability. So this so what of being highly motivated staff with leaders leads to ultimately the triple R, where you have the depth of relationship, where people will use you for whatever they need. The second piece of that is referrals. And the third piece of profitability is the referrals and the relationships, which I'll leave at those two. So for us, it's evolved, and we've gotten more involved in the work, which is working with leaders on so what. Then that's our focus with them, is how do you create this environment, the so what environment of highly motivated staff. And I can tell you the last piece with that is that millennials, a couple in here, and stars in organizations are motivated by a lot of the same things. So for us, for organizations, the so what is that if you want to recruit a new workforce, you want to retain your best staff, start focusing on these few things that truly matter to them. And when you have that, you'll end up with the triple R's. Referrals, renewals, relationships. So thank you.
So my name's Mark. Great stories, by the way. Thank you. Both really inspiring stories. I'm going to change my story that I told you. So my real story is that my life was humming along in a real comfortable way. I was working in a corporate job. I had family, lived out in a beautiful suburban house, had a gorgeous lawn. Everything was wonderful. And then my life started to collapse. And the first part of that collapse was my father died. And my father was my hero. He was somebody I looked up to all my life. He was the person I went to when I needed guidance. And he died when he was 76 years old. And it was crushing. And I said, well, I can live with this. And at the same time, my marriage of over 20 years started to fall apart. And I never imagined that was going to happen to me either. And I said, well, I can make it through all this. Then I found out that I had a serious heart condition. I almost died. And I had 2 heart surgeries. And I managed to pull through it, but I was within about 3 weeks of dying. So I came very close to death. And I was recovering from that, starting to go through my divorce. And my best friend, who was my brother, died of a heart attack. And he had 3 children. So I had to learn to deal with what I was dealing with and his kids at the same time. And my career was getting boring and hard, and I just wasn't excited by it anymore. It just didn't motivate me, and I didn't know what to do. And I just felt like my life was falling apart. And I remember it was Super Bowl weekend, 2014, and I went home on a Friday night after work. And everything was fine at work. Nobody really knew what was going on. And I came and I laid down on my bed. I didn't even take my coat off. And have you ever gotten like in a fetal position like that? And I just didn't get up for the whole weekend. And I realized that I was dealing with grief. I had never grieved. And it was a really huge moment for me. And I said, I want to work with helping people and supporting people. And what do? I don't know what that is. And someone said to me, you know, Mark, I think you'd be a good coach. Have you ever thought about doing that? And I said, no, I never thought about being a coach. So I decided to go to a coaching program, and it was down in Boston, and it was last winter, this January, and there was so much snow that they canceled the session after the first workshop. But there was other workshops that were being held across the country, and I was undeterred, and I went to Ottawa. So I flew north to escape the winter here, and it was 37 below zero in Ottawa when I arrived there. And at that meeting, the facilitator looked at me and she said, I think you're ready for a transformational experience. And so she asked me to stand up in front of a group. And she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to help people. I want to coach people. I want them to have better lives. I want them to know their grief, and I want them to know that there's a side beyond that. And she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to quit my job. And she said, when are you going to do that? And I said, on Monday. She says, well, we're not going to hold you to this. So go up to your room and sleep on it and see how you feel. And so I went up and I slept 9 hours straight. And I knew that was the right decision. So I quit my job at LL Bean in June, and I've launched my career as a coach. And I'm super excited about it. And I'm following my intuition around what I'm doing with my life right now. And someone said, well, what kind of coaching are you doing? And I said, I don't know. And I'll share this one little story about following my intuition. And that is that I was on the way to meet with a prospective client, and this thing popped in my head about working with men in a group. And I said, what the heck was that? And so I met with a prospective client, and 5 minutes into the conversation, he said, have you ever thought about doing a men's group? And I said, well, not until 20 minutes ago. So I think part of my mission going forward is to support men in living a more authentic life, a life where they can be true and honest to themselves, express their feelings for themselves and their families, and create a better world. And that's my story in 5 minutes.